You had one scheduled before you changed on your leg, right?
That was my race day. I was gonna do that.
So this is my.
Okay. Oh, kids.
That's what I was going to ask
Maybe
about.
we'll
Was
talk to do that at 8.
I did too. So
Yeah, especially when doing this at night.
Are they asleep?
well, we
left at
came.
5 this morning. 6
Well, we left at 6, so we didn't wake them up.
I was stating something.
All right, we're live, by the way. So
What?
careful what you say. We're live.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking about doing another one, but you would increase it the same. Yeah. It's
So
just
as I yell at them,
and everybody can hear.
Yes, the whole internet is listening to you right now. All 0 people that are online.
This is gonna take
hello?
forever.
I can't hear you, babe. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, they will work, mine work.
Okay, I need you, it's at 9:30. I'm gonna come get you guys in an hour. So you guys need to get up, get dressed, brush your hair, brush your teeth, have some breakfast, not necessarily in that order. And once you're all ready for church, shoes and everything, then you guys can play on your devices until I show up.
I'm not really a football fan, so
You can hear that?
I'm not doing anything. We're probably going home.
Okay, I can't hear you at all. I'm gonna assume you heard that, because I think I heard a yes. And, I will see you in an hour. Make sure Molly gets up too. Alright, bye.
Is Molly your
I don't know why,
sleeper?
their response is so quiet. It's like right there in their room.
Is Molly your sleeper?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
That child has always been able to sleep, which was marvelous when she was little, but.
Both my girls and all of my granddaughters that Jess and Chris have.
Yeah.
Are all sleepers.
All sleepers.
All sleepers. They just drive me insane.
Clara naturally, I don't think was, but because Molly sleeps so much and I don't purposely wake them up when I don't have to, because why would I? She has become someone who can sleep, but she doesn't like it, so she's fine either way.
Yeah, I'm just like,
I can't
by the
anymore.
time you guys get up, my day's already half over.
We need people
You
like you.
know?
Otherwise, we
And
wouldn't have
I'm
any coffee in the morning.
how do you guys sleep that much? How do you?
Well, I was up at 4:30 today, if that helps.
The only way I sleep that much is after surgery because I have a hard time coming out of the anesthesia. It could take me 3 days to come out of anesthesia if they're not careful and don't listen to me. But other than that, 4 to 5 hours, I'm in heaven.
Oh, Micah would love to do that. Think of all the work you can get done.
Oh. You know,
So you ended up with what,
you
2
know,
hours
my
sleep?
son, he can sleep 7, maybe 8 hours, but he doesn't. He gets up in like 6. And I mean, he can get up at the drop of the hat. My girls, you can take them an hour to get up, even after they sleep. I'm like, dude,
Oh, yeah.
if I sleep longer,
Me and my Molly.
if I sleep longer than 5 hours,
Scott's
I
not here,
feel
so
bad.
he's still
I
awake.
don't feel good. I feel like,
Who knows? He might. He could be live streaming.
well, I just drag. I just can't get going.
It's already tomorrow, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is
Oh.
sometime Monday morning over there.
Okay, I'm leaving to go get Barbara and the girls sometime in the middle after that klaxon alarm goes off.
I'll know that it's because you don't like what I'm saying.
Yeah,
'Cause this is the Micah show, right? Because Chris is
I
sick.
think we need to.
Yeah, we don't like to refer to it as the Micah show. But
You don't like.
Chris and I were gonna tag team ABS this morning,
Uh-huh.
but Chris called in sick, so
Oh,
we need to pray for him. He says he's got some sort of stomach bug and needs to stay. He's at home.
So who's doing, David's doing service.
Yeah, Dave's doing the sermon. Yes, Dave.
It is 4:35 a.m. in Melbourne right
Okay, so
Oh,
hopefully
okay.
it's not online.
And that's
watching, right?
tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Tomorrow,
now. Yeah, Monday.
Monday morning. Oh, gosh.
4:35 a.m. Monday. So sometime
So we should call Scott.
today.
Exactly.
Well,
You know it's up.
he emailed Jennifer
You know
this
it's
morning
up.
at 2:30 our time in the morning
Yeah.
and said, will you please send me a copy of this week's bulletin now? Now, yes.
Well, he's been asking for like 4 days and he's not getting it. I hadn't made it yet.
Oh.
That's why I was here at 6 a.m. to make the bulletin.
Yeah.
That was all his fault.
It was entirely my fault.
I'm gonna be glad when
underestimated
Pastor comes back.
the amount. So I don't know if you guys, every week in the bulletin, there's a devotional guide.
Right, yes.
I don't know how many of you use the devotional guide. But it's a lot of work putting that thing together.
It is.
Scott does it every single week,
Right.
and for the last 2 weeks, I have volunteered to fill in for him.
You did good here.
It's not a full-time job, but it gets close.
And he didn't get much else
Better,
done.
but it's a lot of work.
Yes, it
But,
is.
Yeah, he got done at Friday at 2:30,
That's-
Saturday morning.
That's why I know he's always up between 4:30 and 5, because he does his prayer time first. So, you know.
So,
I didn't get a
Bernie, will you open us up in prayer?
Heavenly Father, we come to you and ask you to bless this fellowship and this study. Make your word we hear, your message. Set it deep in our hearts so that we may serve you better. In Jesus' name, amen.
So before we get into Bible study, I want to talk about something more mechanical. You okay over there, Jim?
I left all my stuff in my office.
I'm sorry.
I don't want to leave to go get it.
A few weeks ago, Scott and Chris were talking with me about WhatsApp and how cool it has been to have so many people in the church on this same platform talking to each other. And they started shouting out, well, wouldn't it be nice if, or couldn't we talk about this, or this thing's really cool. And at some point, I think it was Scott who said it's dumb for us to have this conversation because it doesn't matter what we do, it matters what the church does as a social thing. And if we think it's successful, great. But what does the group think? And so what we were going to do, and I was hoping the group would be a little bit larger, but we had planned to do it this week when Scott was gone. I think he strategically decided, said, Chris, you and Mike can do this while I'm not here. That's a cop-out, is what it is. Anyway, I'd like to talk briefly about your experience with using WhatsApp as a church, with the prayer chain and the announcements and that kind of thing. And let's start with what is good. What has, because this is over the last 6-8 months that we've been doing this, it's been a big change in our internal communication, not just for the prayer chain, but for Sunday lunch, for women's ministry group, for the deacons. We're all kind of in this same boat. So I'm just interested, what has been positive about that experience? And we'll go to negative after.
Well, my positive is I don't have to figure out who I need to call to get an update on what's going on. And I can check for myself.
No question who to call.
Uh-huh.
I like that it's everybody's responsibility to keep their phone number updated.
Yes.
So I can post to a group and know that whoever's in that group gets it. And if they're not in the group anymore, that's their fault. And I like that you can text personally as well as corporately. You can message each other on
Yeah.
quiet. You don't have to broadcast to everybody for personal conversation.
I have to figure that
Oh,
out.
yeah, I haven't figured that out.
Yeah, me too.
We need to have a training.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this is part of the reason to talk about this is to say, what is it, what are ways that it offers us ways to improve, that we can use it better. So one-on-one messaging is cool, maybe that's on a
Yeah.
little
Because
star
not
like this.
because not
Well,
everybody in
yeah.
church is in my address book.
Right. Either put a star after, put training needed.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us don't know how
I'm
to do
gonna mark a
that.
star on everything that people are like, oh, let's figure that out.
I had a question, and you'll probably be able to help me, but somebody tried to get into the WhatsApp, and I was not familiar with the contact at all. So what do you
So-
do to sever that so they won't do it again?
You can block contacts. If you go into that conversation,
Uh-huh.
there's an option there that says block this contact.
Okay.
There are lots of people, WhatsApp is used all over the world.
Yeah.
And there are lots of people that fish around for people to scam.
Yeah.
And so I get, once or twice a week, I get some random number from Namibia or someplace saying, by the way, I am the US Postal Service or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
but before I would do that, I would get a hold her and say, hey, do you know who this number belongs to? Is it someone in the church that we do need to know who they are?
This was a doctor so-and-so.
Oh, yeah, well. we
What
know
did
that.
he instant message you or did he post to the group?
I'm not really sure.
It's
I'm gonna,
probably a direct message. That-
It was probably one of those one-on-one things.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's a doctor so-and-so, it definitely doesn't belong.
Not our church.
No, not anymore. I used to have a doctor here.
A lot of the ones I do, also, if you look, it has a phone number on there, and it's got a country code on it, plus 97, or something, with a plus and some number that isn't a 1. That means it's not in North America, it's not US and Canada, or even Mexico. I think Mexico uses the 1 prefix as well. So anything with a plus and something that isn't a 1 is probably not anybody you know, unless you're Dave Watley, who's in contact with missionaries.
That was, one of my part things too, because I know that there's people in there that are replying that are probably legit, but if I don't know that number, then I don't.
That's one of the
know.
downsides. I thought that when we all signed up with our names and joined a group, that everybody in the group would see our names, but that's not the case. We still
Well-
get phone numbers.
Actually,
I don't know how to fix that.
there is a way to fix that.
Really? For everybody?
No.
What?
whoa!
Now,
Everybody in admin?
No.
That's what.
everybody whose phone contact list has people in it.
Yes,
That is
and.
true.
So here's the way that works. If your phone number, when you're on WhatsApp, is sent out. And so if somebody has your phone number in their phone, it'll show them your name from their phone. But you can also have it set up to where even if they don't have your phone number in there, then it shows your name. The problem is that when you sign up for WhatsApp, it gives you this wonderful, scary message. Something like, do you want to tell everybody in the stinking world your name, or do you want to keep it a secret? And you say, well, I'm going to keep it a secret, right? When you do that, then no, that's why people only see your number. And it's the default, it's the normal way.
Because I tried to do something different with Donna when we signed her up, and it didn't work.
So it's about half and half in my experience of the people that I don't have in my address book. Half of them, I just get a number. And half of them, they put the little tilde, the little squiggly line.
Oh,
Right.
he's got that
That
by
means,
Donna's name.
that means that he's seeing Donna's name, not because he has her in his contacts, because you don't have
That's what
Donna in your phone
screen told me.
contacts, right? Yep. So after you change the setting for Donna,
So
she's
it
now
did work. It
sharing
did work.
her name out there. So it's not, the fix is that each person can make their name public.
Yeah.
But there's no way for us to say, everybody in this group's name is public.
But it's also, if you're not in the group, you shouldn't be able to see anything.
You were
Yes.
Because, well, just last
Yeah, look
night,
at Sally's stuff.
Becky
I know
was
this guy.
asking me, she goes,
This guy was a doctor,
this
that's
Sally
Ron
Wilson
something.
person, and I said, she's a
Who are
Cheyenne that's at the apartment
Yeah.
that, one or the
The
other
Olsons
of these
now,
two
yeah.
apartment buildings. She goes, that's funny because she was Seth's grammar school teacher over at Community Christian.
Oh, really?
How fun.
Making connections.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have two concerns with unknown numbers. One is scams, and one is private contacts. I don't know what better to write about that.
I don't think the scams can come through the groups. I think they have to be instant, like, personal messages.
I think that's correct, because the groups, all the Bridgeway groups that we have are invite only. Somebody has to give you an invite into the Bridgeway group. So all those people in, Timbuktu who are trying to scam you, they might direct message you, but it's not gonna come through the group.
There are 6 or 8 groups now in our Bridgeway WhatsApp. Are some of those groups blocked off from the other ones? Okay, so.
None of the groups can read each other's unless you're in the group.
Oh, I see.
So you have to join, that way you don't get messages from everybody, whether you care or not. You
Well-
join the prayer chain, you join Sunday lunch group, you
Or
join,
you get invited into the Pastor Deacon.
Yeah.
So we can
That's
set
the
a
one
group.
that I had the most concern about.
Yeah, the pastor deacons group is only the pastor deacons and me.
We can set a
Me
group.
and Nancy.
We can set a group to where it's joinable by anybody in our Bridgeway community, or whether even within the Bridgeway community, it's invite only.
Yeah.
So the pastor deacon group is invite only.
Uh-huh.
The joint leadership group is invite only. The, is women's ministry invite only?
Probably. I made a women's ministry leadership, and then I think we should do a women's ministry just in general, because ladies like to talk. I
The
haven't- I haven't really
Sunday,
done
Sunday lunch is open for
it.
joining.
Sunday lunch is open for joining, the
The
shoebox
general
people,
discussion is open for
Wednesday night
joining.
Bible study,
The, yeah, Wednesday
it's
night
all
Bible
open,
study,
prayer chain.
prayer chain.
Members of the group can add other members.
Hmm.
So that's how it's open. It's not private, like I have to approve everybody, but members who are already approved can bring in other people. If that makes sense.
But like the deacons needs approval, I think.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's a-
for the
So we
open,
can set those up, yeah, the different.
but that's not the
groups.
community. The community of Bridgeway has a private group for deacons.
Yes.
But the
Are you
community-
saying anybody at Bridgeway can add anybody else to the community?
Yes, anyone in the community already.
I think it maybe has Sally who got into it, I
think so.
They invited her in.
Yeah.
She's
Well,
one
and
of
like-
Because
our
that way I don't
residents.
have to be the gatekeeper. You know, we're all the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Right.
So like Dee Hall invited his mom,
Yeah.
because she's kind of involved, so you'll see her in there, even though she lives in Pennsylvania or something.
I kind of have a concern with that particular one because it seems to me like they discuss a lot of interpersonal business on our.
Yeah, I don't think they know how to do the one-on-one thing.
Yeah, I think that
I haven't
was,
heard from her
that was a
lately,
mistake. Dee was on the prayer change a couple days ago.
Was his mom, I don't
Was
know.
no, I haven't heard from her.
And I kind of thought, you know, these guys, obviously they have phones, they should be communicating between each other on their own.
Right, well, all you
time.
have to do is tell them that, and that's what the one-on-one messaging is good for.
Yeah, and I think there's been some confusion about, where to post stuff, what should go here, what should go there, a little bit. I think that's how some stuff got posted in general that really should have been a one-on-one conversation.
Right.
And so I think we talked about the one-on-one messaging as a way for us to improve. What else, now that we're here, is there anything that seems awkward in the way that we're using this, or a way that feels like it would be better if? One of the things we talked about, let me give you a chance to mull that over before I put my word.
I have a little problem, and there's no way to fix it, I don't think, but I have a little problem with the fact that people have to make a registration and get an app on their phone. So people like Karen and Adam, who don't have a smartphone, can't join the conversation. And there's not really a good way of fixing that, because texting is not a good solution. Because as you add and remove people, people would text on old conversations and nobody would get everything. It was awful.
Yeah,
There is a way they just point down to the free phone giveaway voice,
Well, they have phones.
but they don't.
They use them to call.
it's less about the phone as about the knowing how to use a smartphone
Exactly.
and
It's complicated.
being comfortable.
So I have a question.
No.
If someone on the praise team talks about being ill, do I or should I go to the prayer part, or can I pray for them under the praise team link?
I wouldn't go to the prayer group unless you ask them first.
Yeah, because it's a different group, so.
But within the prayer chain, they've already posted it, right? So it's not, I mean, not the prayer chain, the praise group. If they
Yeah.
posted it to that group, you can talk about it.
I think it's fine to pray on any of those groups. I mean,
Okay.
we're a church,
That's what I
so.
wanted to know, because I,
Just
should I go over to the prayer link and do it there? or-
Yeah, no,
Nah.
and then other people wouldn't have context, right, because so.
Yeah.
I would
Well, and we don't want
encourage
to talk
if you-
about others unless they know we're doing it.
Yeah, if you have a prayer meeting, then if you're okay with the whole church knowing about it, put it on the prayer group instead of the specific group. But if a person puts it on a specific group, they might mean just to share it with that small group. And so I wouldn't spread it further without their permission.
That's what the one-on-one
That's
messaging
kind of
is
what I
for.
felt, but
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll better ask first.
I know,
And there are times when we go, oops.
but,
There.
yeah,
It's gonna happen.
But it happens, I know, it's okay.
No, I did that
Groups are
yesterday with
understandable.
my daughters.
You-
I messaged one message and I meant for the other. So, yeah.
It's all good.
It wasn't a bad message, was it?
Oh, no, it was, I miss your face, I need to see you.
I have
Oh,
a
wait, not for you.
question, and this may be more for Jennifer, because I'm sitting over here noticing. Is there a way to delete all messages without doing it one at a time? Because I just looked in one of mine, I've got them all the way back to August of last year.
I don't think so. I think we've set the Sunday lunch one to delete after a week. But that's for everybody in the group.
But mine doesn't, that's just
Your
it.
Sunday lunch one should.
I had 2 weeks ago already, so I just went through and.
Maybe it's 2
deleted.
weeks then. Maybe it's 2 weeks then.
Okay.
But, no, we tried to find that when we first set you up, knowing that you wanted all of your old messages gone. And the only way to do that was for the entire group.
Oh, okay. All right.
And a lot of people
No
like being
problem.
able to scroll back and see what's
Right.
happened.
Yeah,
but
I like
did
being
August
able
of last year, so too far to school.
to, well, then, don't do that.
I think a positive thing would be sort of like, we're fellowshipping when we're on there with
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah.
It's like an assembling with the church, kind of, sort of.
And a lot of times when you oops, put something, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Unless you want to process.
Right.
And then you can just add on.
Mhm.
So,
So one of the concerns that Scott and Chris brought up that really is convicting to me too, is the way that we respond, the way that I respond to the prayer chain. It's very easy to receive those requests and say, God touch John, and move on with my life, right? Or to look at it and say, praying hands, and move on with my life, right? But it's also, there's not necessarily feedback for you if someone does, like for instance, Scott said that, you never see him post on the prayer chain. You don't see him post praying hands or whatever, but he reads that
Yeah.
and stops and prays.
Yes.
And so he was saying, well, does that obviously the prayer helps, but does that help the fellowship for him not to respond? Because you don't necessarily know that the pastor's praying for you.
Right,
So-
but we also don't necessarily need 400 texts.
That's
for
the other
everything.
business balance, right?
Yeah.
Do we want to say, okay, there's 80 people on the group, and so every time somebody posts, everybody take 5 minutes to pray for that request, and then write out your entire prayer longhand and hit send, and then we will all read them over the next 3 hours. No, obviously we don't want to go there, but I'm bringing up this balance between the intimacy of being next to someone, taking their hand and praying for them, where they know this person, it cares, is bringing my need before the Lord, versus the overwhelmingness of too much coming in. What do you think about that? Where do you feel like a good line is with that?
I think that if the need is a dire response, sometimes I've been known to just call people.
Yeah.
Just stop and call
Just
straight on the
stop
phone.
and call them and pray with them in a call. Because you get the information, well, this surgery is happening now. I think Bobby can attest to that. I called him when I knew he was having his surgery. And that's something that I didn't feel would be adequate on the WhatsApp, so I just called him. And he's just one person of many. But if I know that the urgency is there, then I won't even bother with what's happening. I'll just call them directly and pray with them.
I know.
I feel that if I post something for prayer, I know somebody is going to pray. it doesn't have to be 20 people. So it doesn't matter if they say, it's, I know somebody,
It's hard. I like,
and God is going to listen.
I like the response because it doesn't feel like crickets. No, here's my prayer, Jay, here's my prayer need, and nobody says anything. Unless that's the policy, it's a little cold. So having several people bounce up, but not everybody, is kind of nice, but. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of the way I felt. I got overwhelmed with the prayer chain. That's when David and his mother were really at it. I don't know, it's just as bad. When my phone beeps a message, it could be work, it could be something urgent. So I stopped what I'm doing, get my phone out. And if that's 10, 15 times, and you know, after something is posted, it does get overwhelming.
So that's something we probably have in training too. Because one thing you can do is without leaving a group, you can say, posts on this group, don't ding my phone. But posts on the other. So you can have it to where if there's a post on the deacons thing, it goes ding, and if the post on the prayer chain, it doesn't.
That would be something.
And so that would be something worth us going through probably.
Write down etiquette, messaging etiquette, or as part of the training. I don't know.
I think I might.
You're an educator. Good.
Well, you can just like, for what you were talking about, you can just change your tone. Or like,
Have a custom tone for
yeah,
WhatsApp.
the custom tone just for WhatsApp,
If you want.
just for those messages, and then for your work and everything else, you can have that.
Yeah, that could be on the training.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a good thing, 'cause I'd like to know that.
I'm locked out of my house. It's a little bit more urgent than,
I bring,
Yeah, that's true.
you know,
Yeah.
so.
Any other thoughts while we're here?
I'm wondering if it wouldn't hurt to have one or two people who take as a ministry, keeping an eye on those kind of messages, just to make sure that somebody's reading them and responding. Because we could, like, for the prayer chain, have a prayer, I don't know, like a prayer group that manages it and responds, and then the rest of us don't.
Well, another thing,
Or something like that, because there are some people who can really put the time into reading all those things, and like you're not gonna. Scott doesn't. I have, when something comes up, I notice, I text him and say, hey, go look at the prayer table or whatever.
well, there's another thing that happens that's related to that, and that is that we hear a lot of prayer requests come through. And we see a fair number of praises come through. But it's hard to get a sense of that. It would be interesting if someone felt led to do so, to have like a
Moderator.
weekly or every other week little thing saying, you know, this was resolved, so-and-so was healed, you know, this is still ongoing, this is, you know, still a thing. Because sometimes, you know, you don't know that, Dee, if you're watching, I'm gonna talk about you, but I know you're okay with that. Dee Hall, 6 months ago, was talking about his chronic pain and asking for prayer
Right.
over and over again.
Right.
It hasn't gone away.
No.
He's still fighting with that, you know, but we don't hear about it because it's become the new normal, sorry, Dee. And so, you know, he's posting all the time, but something where, what is still outstanding, it might be interesting to have I don't know what that would look like, how that would come out, but it's just an idea of how do we take these things that are like here and gone.
Well, this issue's been resolved, so
Yeah,
thanks for your prayers, or
yeah, or if somebody was keeping a list, then they could, in a one-on-one thing, say, hey, you asked about such and such last week. Is that resolved? Is everything okay? Should we keep praying?
Follow-up calls.
Yeah, like a follow-up thing, and then that person maybe could periodically update the group, hey, remember these things are still outstanding, but without, I don't want to, again, there's this balance between ding, 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 ding,
Yeah.
and we forget it's happened. So we've got to find something in between.
Sometimes I know that there's a substantial amount of time between responses on some requests, and you have to go back through the whole list to get to the top to see what the request was, because this response came like 2 days later.
It's true. Now, that also might be something to put on the training, because, and I know that most people don't know this because I never see it happening. You can, in WhatsApp, instead of just writing a new message, you can hold your finger on the message that you're responding to, and say, reply to this message. And what it does then is it tracks that your reply is attached to that message, and people who see your reply see a little bit of that message and a link back to it.
That definitely needs to be in the training.
Because it's quick to do, and it's easy to forget, and it helps people who are coming into the conversation.
No longer watching in dark.
Oh,
All right. Anything else before we move away from this? Because I don't want to spend the whole time talking about WhatsApp.
When I read in the prayer group, I'm stop and pray, and then I get the praying hands, and to me, that's my way of showing that person, hey, I heard you and I prayed for you.
Yeah.
Is that wrong?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm just trying to think through.
It's just part of the balance.
Yeah, it's part of the balance, and it's part of, for me, it's part of remembering, if I'm going to put down those praying hands, I need to be conscious that I actually did pray with some thought, instead of just saying, oh, Lord, help, Lord. And, I mean, not that that isn't a prayer. I mean, I'm remembering you in my prayers, but I feel like if I'm gonna respond and say, I'm praying for you, Lord, I ought to have done a little bit more than just God help Lori and put it back in my pocket. Right?
Exactly, that's what the prayer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been known also to take.
I took time to pray.
yes. Sometimes I write my prayers out on there.
I've
I do.
noticed that. It's kind of nice.
And when
It would be
I
annoying.
don't
for everybody
have
to-
time with my hands or cooking or I'm doing something where I can't, I'll do the prayer hands real fast and then.
Yeah.
But I like to just pray right on the phone. I don't have a problem doing that.
Hang on just a minute, Lori. Dave had something to say.
I was gonna say, for a while, got in the habit of actually revisiting the list at the end of the day when I'm praying the day out and praying over every one of those requests.
There's that too. That's almost like a follow-up prayer time.
Yeah. Or you didn't have time in the day because you were busy or
Right,
to see
yeah.
that. So at the end of the day, when you're closing out the day, just go through the entire list and pray over each one of
Just
those.
can't pray all the time.
Lori, what were you going to say?
Well, back again on the praying hands thing. On one hand, I feel like I'm trying to get acknowledgement because, ooh, I did a good thing, I prayed for these people. But if I don't let them know I prayed, then do they think, well, nobody cares?
Yeah.
If nobody responded?
I
So
think there was,
I'm torn.
Somebody would get that deep into their problem that, yeah, they no,
I wouldn't feel bad if nobody responded at all.
they would think.
I would feel bad.
Nobody cared. Okay,
Yeah.
See,
Or nobody saw it, something went wrong.
Yeah.
See, I've been here long enough that I know if I put something there, I know there's people that are gonna see it, whether they
That's what I always
respond
say.
or
Yeah.
not. And I would not take that personally because I know my church family.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I know they're praying for me.
I think there's that.
But new people, I can see what they might.
I think that's why it's good that we all take slightly different approaches. Because if everybody in that group said praying hands, what's going to be requests, praying hands, praying hands, praying hands, right? It's going to be like that. But if nobody does, then you look and you're like, well, you know, they listened to Dave's prayer.
Oh, yeah, to respond
Or
to
something
one
like that,
about
you
the
know?
other.
I can see where you feel bad. But also, there is something personal about it. If you're saying, by putting that up, I actually spent some time and thought about this. I didn't pray for you for an hour necessarily, but,
Right.
you know, I'm thinking about you. That's valuable to them. It's not just a pat me on the back, look at me, I'm doing my prayer duty today. it really is valuable to me to know Richard is thinking about me right now. You know, that's, somebody is with me in this. So I don't think you should feel bad, Lori, about it. I don't think you should feel selfish at all about doing it.
Okay. But then, that doesn't help with our ding, ding, ding situation.
Well, that's, we
So-
can cover that in training.
There's another thing, having to do with this replying. I don't know what they call it, but if you are just gonna put a praying hands or a little emoji like that, if you hold in on the one that you're replying to, it pops up, and instead of doing a full reply, you hit praying hands. It doesn't make a whole new message, and it doesn't, correct?
It doesn't notify.
It doesn't notify anybody but the person who posted that.
Oh, so we gotta have that.
And then it puts a number next to it. So if everybody, if 27 people did that, it'll say 27 people did praying hands.
Wait.
And you can tap on it and see who
That's,
was.
yeah, that's.
How do you
gotta
do
be in
that?
there.
Hold your finger on a message that was posted.
Yeah, that's the only way to do this.
No, the other way that most people are doing it is typing the thumbs up in a new message.
Oh.
And so the new thumbs up message dings everybody,
Right,
and they say, oh, thumbs up to something,
right.
right? Or praying hands or whatever it is.
I see
So-
that.
So that hold your finger on it and reply.
You can do a thumbs up, a heart, a laugh, a cry,
Right.
a pray.
Yep.
Oh,
Clap.
wow.
There it is.
Yeah, so that's a
So you
useful
just
thing.
hold your
And that will
finger right there.
reduce,
And that
No,
doesn't
forever.
ding, that doesn't ding people.
that doesn't take people.
I
That's a
think-
good solution.
I think what we're seeing is somebody's already put it on there. Now, hold on, there. You know, and, yeah.
There it
Well,
is.
no, you can hold on the message.
Oh,
Whatever
The
message you
original
want,
message.
uh-huh.
whatever message you want, even if it's a reply and you want to thumbs up it or
Yeah,
whatever.
you hold on the original message, but it takes all the folks that did the
Uh-huh.
same emoji
Uh-huh.
and puts them in one symbol. So it'll say, if 3 people did praying hands, then attached to that message, it'll show praying hands and a little number 3.
Awesome.
And then if somebody wants to know who those people were, you tap the praying hand that says it was Lori, and it was Donna, and it was Jim.
Oh, that was
And then there's a heart that says 5 people did the heart message or whatever. It'll,
awesome.
yeah, that's a good solution.
Yes.
Yeah.
nice.
Are you put that on the training?
I did reply an emoji.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, I can't read that.
So what I would like you to do before we go on, because I'm going to erase this board, Madam Secretary, will you take a picture of this? And,
Can you turn the lights off?
Yeah.
I think I can.
Yeah, but that will show up.
Actually, maybe.
Did that get it?
Takes the glare off.
Yep. What do I do with it? Post it, what's?
Yes, but also, we need to figure out the time, maybe another half hour in an ABS,
Yeah.
when we go through these things, with our phones out, say, this is how you actually do this,
Okay,
and talk it through again.
that'd be good.
Yes.
That'd be good.
Thumbs up.
But,
Thumbs up.
oh, good, you gotta hold on the board. Okay, so while I'm erasing the board, I want 2 things. I want you to make sure you have a bulletin for today.
Yep.
And then go find the first chapter of Hebrews. Somebody read me verses 1 and 2 when you get there.
Hebrews what?
Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 and 2.
I have it.
Go ahead.
God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in times past to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by the Son, whom he has appointed heir of all things, through whom also he made the worlds.
So, in our New Testament time, God has spoken to us in a brand new way that he did not speak in the Old Testament. He did not send his Son before, right? So we have this brand new way. But sometimes we look at this as saying, now God has only spoken to us by sending his Son. But what I want to bring attention to is that he still speaks in various ways. And one of the things with what Scott has shared with us from the Lord the last couple of weeks is that we are to be looking for God's guidance in particular and looking for it the way that the Lord might deliver it, yes, which can happen in various ways. And I was noticing as I was putting together the devotional guide for this week that you have in the bulletin, I was following along with Paul's journey, his second missionary journey. And he gets guided in that missionary journey in a bunch of very different ways. God does not guide him the same way from city to city. And so if you'll indulge me, I'd like us to go through that a little bit as it relates to us, looking for the ways that God may be guiding us as a church as we move into new ministry opportunities or whatever he has for us.
Sometimes I think I'm getting message from God, but I'm not sure about it. I just think about it. I'm not sure.
Well, that is exactly one of the things that made me want to talk about this. Is as I was looking through this, go to Tuesday in today's bulletin. There's a section in Acts 16. Well, no, actually, let's come back to that, Margaret. Let's start, because we'll start on at the beginning of this journey of Paul's. So I want everybody to turn to Acts 15 and start in verse 36. And this is the weirdest and most disappointing way that I know God ever to have, well, no, not ever. In this trip, this is the worst way, the way that I really don't want God to lead us. But he uses it, okay? So somebody read in Acts 15:36.
I have it.
Okay.
You just want 36, that's all.
Get to a thought break.
Okay. And after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us return and visit the brothers in every city where we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are." Now Barnabas wanted to take with them John and Mark. But Paul thought best not to take with them one who had withdrawn from them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there arose a sharp disagreement, so they separated from each other. Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and departed, having been commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord. And he went through Syria and Cilicia.
Cilicia.
Yes, strengthening the churches.
So
So it's 30.
Paul had an idea of what he wanted to do. What did Paul want to do? He wanted to visit existing churches.
Right.
Now, he does some of that in his missionary journey, but it's not his primary thing. What he mainly does and what the Lord sends him out to do in this missionary journey is to start new churches. And God has another plan for Barnabas. And so God uses something really disappointing to guide them. Now, I'm not saying God caused the disagreement at all. What I'm saying is that sometimes God uses our mistakes to bring about his purpose. So Paul and Barnabas quarrel. And we don't, that's the worst way for God to guide a church. But believe me, it has happened more times than any of us would like to admit. And God works through mess-ups.
Yes, he does.
Right? We're all mess-ups. And so it's interesting to me that he starts this story. The Lord allows this to get into the Acts to tell us that he is going to work his purpose in us, even when we're being mess-ups, A. And B, even the best missionaries in the world, which Paul Barnabas were, I don't, you could argue with me about that maybe, but I don't think you will, are prone to mess-ups. And so God's method was to redeem quarreling. What a weird thing. But he doesn't stop there. I'm ready to move on unless you guys want to talk more about the quarreling.
I think we should talk about the same thing as quarreling is, if, like, working it out or compromising, or what is exactly exactly, it's not, quarreling sounds like a negative word, but
Well, I
there
think,
has to be other words for working it out.
but the problem is that Paul and Barnabas didn't work it out.
Yeah.
What they should have done, I think, I'm about to correct the apostles. Anyway, what they should have done is gotten somebody else involved, right? They should have taken this to some brother there at Antioch and said, what's going on here? But what we see happen is that Paul is standing his ground. And he could totally have been a bit wrong. I mean, Mark was a young man. He left to go back home. Maybe he was afraid of persecution. It's been a few years. Maybe he's grown up. And Paul's like, nope, I'm not even going to listen to that. Okay? But Barnabas, on the other hand, says, Paul, we have been through persecution. We have been through danger. God has used us mightily, but I'm not moving 1 inch on this unless you take my cousin Barnabas with us. Okay? And neither of them gave at all. So what happens is Barnabas says, okay, Mark, come with me. And they went to Cyprus, which is where they were from. And Paul goes off in another direction. So, and as far as we know, we don't hear about Paul and Barnabas getting together again later. Mark and Paul apparently become reconciled at some point. Hopefully the Lord worked it all out. But this is a mess. It's really hard to put a positive spin on what happened here with Paul and Barnabas. We're not to emulate what they did here, I don't think.
You know, I've got to say this, Mike, I've been to probably 6 different Baptist churches over my lifetime. Every one of them has spawned other churches because of splits in the church. What you call it a quarrel or argument, or they're just maybe don't want to emphasize this, and someone now wants to talk in tongues, so they become disagreements. But it's kind of like that's the way that the Baptist churches would expand. You had like 3 of them.
Yes, it's cell division, right? It's the natural thing.
Right.
And that, again, I think it's not good, but it's something that God has used. It's like when Paul is talking about sin and he says, where sin abounds, grace much more abounds. And then he says, so then, what's the conclusion? Let's sin an awful lot so that God's grace can get big, right? No! But he goes through that. He says that's obviously somebody's going to say that. And that's what's happening here, is that I want to point out that God is in the redeeming business. And so he has redeemed church splits. And he has redeemed quarrels. But that doesn't mean that we all really ought to get angry at each other so God can use us. Think of it. If we were all angry at each other, how many churches could he spawn? 1, 2, 3, 4. You know? Wouldn't it be great to have another 27 churches? No, not that way.
Under those conditions.
No, he made the Jews jealous of the Gentiles.
Yes.
That's the only way he could reason with them to penetrate their mind.
God uses our mess.
Yes.
You know, we are broken, and he enters into this world of our brokenness to fix it, which is just an awesome thing. Even the apostles are broken too. So in a way, this is a discouraging start to a missionary journey. But for us, it's kind of an encouraging thing, because we can look at this and say, well, Dave's trip to Cuba didn't start that bad, right? And yet God turned this one around to be one of the greatest missionary journeys ever. And so God has the ability to say, hey, flight delay in Florida, I can redeem that, right? Hey, argument among brothers, I can redeem that. He can fix it.
The only thing that was lost was a day's time.
Yeah.
And that got made up in many ways.
Another thing, like when Joseph was down in that hole, in the desert, he said, I wouldn't have been able to do what I did if you hadn't have abandoned me and for dead. I've always said, I wouldn't want to do it that way.
Well, doesn't he kind of put it, he says, what you meant for evil, God
Yes.
turned
It's
around.
for good.
Isn't that,
Yeah.
wasn't that you talking about that?
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the amazing things about God's sovereignty over everything,
Yes.
right? Is he lets us do all the bad we want to do, right? He doesn't stop us,
No,
but he just kind of says, I can work with that.
yeah.
And he arranges everything around and in and among us and where he puts us and where he's planned so that his purpose comes out anyway. Go ahead, Don.
I had a desire, remember when I was talking to you about getting in the worship team a while ago?
Yes.
And I was
Breathing
feeling,
coffee's a
I
bad
was feeling like not real sure of it. And I actually can honestly say I went through a relationship thing. And it wasn't until that was over that I really was told, okay, you can go now. Because there's a lot to say. I always like to think of the potter's wheel. You know, we're the clay, he's the potter, and when something's just not set right, he smashes you down, and then he builds you back up to where he wants you to be. And that's what I try to think about. I try to think that he's the potter. And he's gonna manipulate and do whatever is going on in your life. If he's not happy with it, like you said, I can use that, but she's gotta go through this first, or he's gotta go through this first to get him or her where I want her to be. And I'm down for that when he does that, because you do become a better servant for him out of all of it.
That's right. Surely you could say something.
Well, yeah, because Scott's been asking us since our get-together to discuss our congregational stuff, what we see or hear God telling us individually for this coming year. And I still don't have a direct answer to that question, but it's coming when I'm ready, God's timing when I'm ready. But what he has done already, he has closed multiple doors. I mean, right down, obvious they've been closed. And he has settled my heart. This is where I have to be. He has not told me what I'm going to be doing. This is where it's going to be done. And I'm okay with that.
Well, and that's a perfect lead-in to the next step of Paul's missionary journey. So somebody grab Acts 16, verses 6 through 10. And read them for us. You got it, Dan?
Paul and his companions traveled throughout the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been kept by the Holy Spirit from preaching the word in the province of Asia. When they came to the border of Mysia, they tried to enter Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus would not allow them to. So they passed by Mysia and went down to Troas. During the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing and begging him, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." After Paul had seen the vision, he got ready at once to leave for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them.
So Paul has a plan. He knows he's supposed to be on this missionary journey. And he says, aha, Asia, close by, big opportunity, let's do that. And the Lord says, no. And just like what Shirley said, the Lord didn't say, by the way, now's the time to go to Macedonia. He just says no. And so Paul and his companions know they're supposed to be on a missionary journey. They're not supposed to stay where they are, and they're not supposed to go to Asia. Look around, look around, look around. Ah, Mysia, let's go into Bithynia. That's a big opportunity. Isn't that great? The Lord, we can spread the word of the Lord in Bithynia. And the Lord speaks to somebody, and it doesn't tell us that it was always Paul. It might have been, Luke here. The Lord's really telling me that we shouldn't go here. Or Timothy or somebody. Silas. Nope, no Bithynia. Okay, so there is a road we need to walk past. So they keep heading down to Troas. That's the My understanding geographically is that was basically the only thing they could do. They didn't turn that way, and they didn't turn that way, and there's a port up here at Troas. So here we are at this port. We can get in a boat and go anywhere. We know we weren't supposed to take the land routes. What's up? It doesn't say how long they were at Troas, but some evening, God comes and gives Paul a vision. So God's using a number of things in here. First off, we have the no. Now, I don't know if you've ever, but I imagine you have. I imagine just about everybody in this room has had something where you intended to do something or other. And the Lord said, no. Now, if you're like me, sometimes you did it anyway. But it was pretty clear on the way in, right? And I don't necessarily mean you heard a voice from heaven, but somebody, you know that feeling when the Lord is disapproving of what it is that you're about to do? Okay? I see some nods. I think that's what's happening here, is that they were aware and they paid attention to it. We're going to go here, and somebody says, oh, no, the Lord says no. He doesn't want us to do that. It was clear to them. One of the things we see over and over in the guidance that the churches and all the people in the Bible get from the Lord is that it often doesn't come when they want it, but when it comes, it's very, very seldom that they say, I wonder if that was the Lord. You know what I mean? People look and they say, well, how do you know that it's the Lord speaking? The Bible isn't clear about that. You know why the Bible isn't clear about that? Because God is really good at making himself clear. If you are listening and wanting to hear from him, and he wants to tell you something, he's really good at letting you know, especially the no. I think for most of us, that's the first, maybe the first or second thing that the Lord communicates to us. One of them being, I'm real, come to me. And the other one being, you're about to sin right now, quit it. Right? So that's number one. They get a couple of no's. And then Paul has a vision. But it's very interesting what happens with this vision. He has a vision in the night. And they don't. He doesn't just run out and do things without talking to anybody else. When what David read, it says, we concluded that God had directed us to go into Macedonia. So Paul has this vision. He comes and he talks to Silas and Luke. And I ran across this great article that's in your part of it, as much as I could fit of it.
We really had to edit.
Is on this page, the Tuesday page in your bulletin from McLaren. And I just want to read this out loud because this is so good. Acts is the white section in the middle of the page here. Acts is careful to point out how each extension of the church's work was directed and commanded by Jesus Christ himself. Paul had no doubt that he saw a vision from Christ, but the next step was to be sure of what the vision meant. He does not make up his mind himself, but calls those with him to talk the matter over. Our time is not wasted making sure of the meaning of revelations before we begin to act. How can we be sure of God's intention for us? And this gets to what Margaret was talking about a few minutes ago. How can we be sure of God's intention for us? First, are we sure we want to know it? Or would we rather force our intentions on him? People will say, oh, I have such a strong impulse to do certain kinds of Christian service that I'm sure it's God's will. How are you sure? A strong impulse may be a temptation from the devil as well as a call from God. It's useless to say, this course of action is clearly the result of the truth of the gospel. That may be all perfectly true, and yet the course may not be the course for you. Now think about that. What Paul wanted to do in Asia and Mysia and Bithynia was to spread the gospel. This is totally in line with the Great Commission, but it was not God's course for him at that moment. Onward with McLaren. Learn from difficulties. Some are things to be overcome, but some are God's warnings to us to go by another road. We need discretion, patience, and suspense of judgment, that is, waiting, applied to all our purposes and plans. But if we wish supremely to know God's will, He will help us distinguish between these two kinds of difficulties. The way to get light is to seek it in the book and in communion with Him whom the book reveals as the true Word of God. Careful consideration is a preliminary to all good work, and if you can, talk to some Timothy and Silas and Luke, and do not be above taking a brother's advice. This is really solid stuff that McLaren's writing here. Because what he's saying is, if you think that the Lord says, go here, that's the time to talk to your brothers and say, I feel the Lord has revealed this to me because of this. It's okay for us to talk about how the Lord speaks. The apostles do that. They'll say, I had an impression from the Spirit, or I had a vision, or there's an opportunity. Be specific. And you talk with your brothers and sisters and say, what does this thing mean from the Lord? Like what Scott did a couple of weeks ago. When he came to us, he said, the Lord has shown me that there are going to be opportunities presented to us. He didn't immediately say, well, church, I'll tell you what the opportunities are because I'm sure I'm going to know, right? He's laying in front of us, the believers, because the Lord is working in us too. The Lord wants us to be in partnership with one another as well as with Him. And it's okay for us to be a little bit slow and a little bit waiting when we're waiting for clarity. But what we see is as soon as that clarity comes, right? Paul says, okay, I had a vision. Let me talk to Silas and Timothy and Luke. All right, let's talk about this. Let's see what happened. The Lord closed the door in Asia. The Lord closed the door in Bithynia. We're here at a port. I had a vision about Macedonia. It's a real short trip across the water. What do you guys think? Duh, Paul. God wants us to go to Macedonia. And now they're in agreement. And what do they do? The Bible uses the word immediately. Quick obedience after clarity. But it wasn't a waste of time for them to stop and get clarity and unity together.
I'll be back with children.
So God uses three different methods in this one sequence. He gives them the clear no, don't go that way. Then he gives Paul a vision. And then he uses the counsel of other ministers to confirm that vision and clarify the direction. And then they go to Macedonia instead of these places Paul wanted to. You with me? So where does Paul go next?
Well, was there a difference in Macedon and Asia? Why was he not interested in Macedon?
I can only speculate about that. Asia was kind of on the road, right? They were going up this way, and they could have continued on that road and gone into Ephesus, where there was a church planted there later anyway. Lots of good stuff happened in Asia and Bithynia later on. So I imagine that Paul said, well, we're going down this road. Makes sense to keep going down this road. And then the Lord said, nope, turn left. Something like that. But again, we're speculating a little bit.
There was a timing issue.
Yeah.
Macedonia is across the Aegean Sea.
Yeah, so they couldn't really, it would have been a long land route. They had to come down to Troas and get on the boat. So he gets on the boat. He goes across to Philippi. Has actually some great success there. Lydia gets saved. There's a church established. And then they have this issue where there's this demon-possessed girl, and Paul casts out the demons, and her owners who have been using her connection with the powers of darkness to make money, because, people love using the powers of darkness to make money. It's great. It's a great deal. Dave's going to be talking about that a little bit in the sermon. But anyway, they're upset. They call in the authorities. Paul and Silas get beaten. They get thrown in jail. They're praising the Lord. The Lord shakes the jail. The jailer gets saved. And all of this stuff happens, and they come out of jail. And what happens after that? The officials of the city, who have finished beating them and throwing them in jail overnight, come and make an official apology because they were wrong.
Yeah.
They get an official apology, and they get an official request that they leave. So Paul was having great success, honestly, in Philippi. He'd been staying there a while. My guess is that his plan, had everything else been equal, he would have just continued. But God wanted him to leave. And in this case, talk about speaking by many in various ways. God directs him to leave by government request. I think that's funny. Moving on. So he gets up from there, and he goes to Thessalonica. And in Thessalonica, he again has some good success. He starts a church, isn't it great? But then there's some persecution. But Paul isn't quite done. I'm guessing he's not quite done. We're not reading the whole thing, but you guys can read this. He's not quite done. He's never really been one to just run away in the face of persecution. Okay? There's a persecution. But I think he's still thinking, maybe it's time to stay. But the Lord wants him to leave. And if you read the narrative, the church asks him to leave. The brothers and sisters come and say, Paul, it's time. It's time for you to move on. We've had enough riots for now. But the church comes and speaks to him. And I'm being a little bit facetious here talking about this. But it's very real for God to give revelation about you to your brothers and sisters sometimes. To be able to speak to you through them and say, you know, there have been times we've been in a deacon's meeting and Scott says, I don't know about this or that. And Dave and Richard or somebody will pipe up and say, Tom, I got to say, Scott, I really think the Lord wants this and such. It's very scriptural to be able to listen to your brothers and sisters. And the fact is that Paul is not doing this because he is not spiritual enough to hear for himself. You know what I mean? Sometimes we think, well, you know, I'm mature. I don't need to listen to anybody else. This is a good sign that you are not mature. Okay? And so Paul is demonstrating this for us. The church says to him, now it's time to move on. Okay? So he moves on. He goes to Berea, and the same thing happens. He has good success. The people from the previous town come and stir up trouble. And ultimately, the Berean church says to him, the church says, Paul, it's time for you to leave. Twice in a row, the Lord directs Paul to move on in his missionary journey by the converts that he has just made. Think about that. This is a new church. And these new converts are telling Paul, we've been praying. We think it's time for you to leave. And Paul takes it. We don't think there's an argument here. I'm not suggesting that there was any argument. But what I'm saying is, again, back to Hebrews 1, God speaks at many times and in various ways. And if we're going to take what Scott said seriously, that we need to be looking for the various ways that God is speaking to us, the Bible's our example. Here's some various ways. Let's be looking, right? So he leaves Berea because the church asks him to. And he goes to Athens. And Athens is a trip. Everywhere else, almost everywhere else that we see Paul go, he runs into some Jews or some believers or something, and he starts talking in the synagogues. Athens is full of all these wacko philosophers and idol worshippers, and he ends up talking in their big powwow of philosophical idol worship, right? He gives this great speech in which we see how the Lord changes not Paul's message, but the form of his message to be more approachable to the folks that he's talking to. He talks very differently to the people in Athens than he did to the Jews in Antioch. Take some time and look at that. It's really cool.
I always thought let's say, what does our temperament have to do with it? You've got people that are shy, and then people that are assertive, and some people are so distracted and artistic, different things. And how does that factor in with God's Spirit? And that always was a distraction for me.
I don't have a scripture to quote here, but if any of you thinks of one, fill in, because the way that my experience has been is that God works with that in two ways. One is, again, he's in the redeeming business, and he made the personality that we have. He changes aspects of it, but largely, we're still the people. I'm still Micah, even though I've been redeemed. And in the normal course of everyday stuff that he calls me to do, often he works with me in a way that works with my personality, works with my bent. But to contrast that, sometimes he will do something that caused me to do something, call me to do something that's so out of character that shocks people. And he uses that as a method. So there are times when I tend to be usually a quiet person. I think of myself that way. Maybe I'm thinking about that. I don't know. But there are times when he makes me a loud person. I tend to be a person who does not reach out and make friends. You guys don't see me in that light. I don't know. But growing up, I was only friends with people who made themselves my friends. I did not make friends. People made friends with me, right? But God lets me live in that sort of introverted way, except that he calls me out of it from time to time to go over there and talk to that person. Drives me nuts. But when you know that it's him, you do it, and he uses it mightily, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this balance where I think in normal day-to-day, God redeems our normalcy and deals with us where we are. But then he has these moments where he says, all right, bud, psych yourself up for this. And off we go. I don't know if that answers your question.
He does the opposite with me. He makes me go, it drives Becky nuts, but I'll talk to a snake if it goes.
So you and I are so different. Our natural bit is different. I imagine sometime soon we've been
needs to talk to those
talking about spiritual gifts, and that's a long discussion. Anyway, there are gifts that we are given for a momentary ministry that may be completely and totally out of our character. But some of the gifts that we have are gifts that we've been given for our life, gifts that have to do with our natural bent. And some people have gifts that their natural bent is to go talk to the snake.
Yes.
Right?
If you always fail.
And some people have gifts that their natural bent is to hole up in a room by themselves and read a book deeply. And the Lord redeems both of those things because he made us to be different because it's more interesting. All right, I'm almost done. We have time to get.
No. Already.
It's 10:47.
Okay. Well then. And so
To be
Paul went
continued.
home. The end. All right. Who's going to pray? No, actually, so he leaves Corinth, and the Bible's not exactly clear about what prompts him to leave Corinth, although it could be because he had gone through this whole segment of talking to people and then ending up in the biggest stage, not Corinth, I'm sorry, Athens, in the biggest stage in Athens. And he gives this wonderful speech, and they pretty much reject it. Some people are laughing at it, and some are saying, we'll hear you again on this matter. And I always thought that meant, ooh, we're interested. Some of the commentators I was reading said, no, the way that's worded sounds like they're saying, don't call us, we'll call you. It was nice, maybe we'll have you present to us again later.
before we close in prayer, one of my residents has asked that I ask my group to pray for her. She's still recovering from some surgery. She's still having some issues from that. But she's also got some bladder issues going on right now and some really bad acid reflux they can't get under control. And she's trying to get over, she says a cold. It could have been the flu that was going around. But she just is not feeling well and she's getting very weak.
May we know her first name or would it be Karen? Karen?
Karen.
Karen.
And I've known her kids and my kids grew up together, so known her for a long time.
Richard, will you pray and close for us?
Father in heaven, we do thank you for being here with us as your word says it's with your gathered. But Lord, you've heard these prayers and you've heard the comments made. Father, I just pray that you would work in each of our hearts to have your will done. Father, you guide and direct us by your word and spirit. Father, as we go into the worship service, I pray that you would give us that protection, that the evil one would have no end. Fill David with the words you would have him to speak today. We ask this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Oh, yeah.
I can see everywhere.
Means something for him that does.
I learned a lot about
When I was in the store, the way the light, it just looked like just an odd light.
I guess there's some good.